Okay, we're live, guys. We've got about 130 people loading up to the new defrost, number 57, redesigning our sense of place. We're very excited about this webinar specifically because up until now we've had 56 defrosts, but we've had them off-site in our studio here in Sydney, which has been really amazing over the last 4 years. So it's our first night tonight, or morning if you're in London, etc., on a live webinar for defrost. This is a really exciting one for us because we've got the incredible Andrew Tuck from Monocle magazine with us. Welcome, Andrew.
Welcome. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. Thank you.
It's really cool to have you all the way from London. And I've got my co-host, Kat Burgess, as well. Welcome, Kat. She's mute. You're muted, Kat. Hold on. I think you're muted, Kat.
Yeah, unfortunately, Kat, we can't hear you yet, so we'll have to carry on with Vince first.
yeah, let's just keep going. Kat, no, you just down the bottom. There's a muted button. The blue button in the middle. Let me work on the introduction. So very excited to have Andrew here, and this is the issue with live events, and I guess Andrew's no novice to this because obviously running Monocle magazine, editing the content over the last 16 years, Andrew?
Yeah, we launched in 2007, so it's been quite a while now.
It's a very long time, and I guess Monocle magazine is synonymous with design and all things design and cities and living, etc. It's this incredible publication, and like all designers, I'm a massive fan. So it kind of gives me goosebumps to have you here tonight, if that's okay to say. But in a way, it's our design Bible, creative Bible on insights to how people live globally, and it's something that is very much part of the world's kind of, I guess, creative vernacular. And so, you can't get on. So before joining Monocle, it's really cool because you were the editor at the Independent on Sunday newspaper. When was that? Was that like in the late 90s?
You're giving me a slight promotion. I was the editor of the magazine for the Sunday and for the Saturday magazine as well. So I ran at various times both of those magazines. But yeah, I also had about 9 years at the Independent, where you also did some work as well.
No, it was really interesting. I'm not sure if we crossed over or not, but when I redesigned the Independent Saturday magazine with David Robson, which was such an amazing experience for me, to work on a publication that was a weekly, and the speed of producing that is just incredible, and having that richness of editorial team behind it was definitely my first experience in that kind of the publishing world. And then later to redesign the newspaper, which was a daily, which was even faster, of course. But we were talking earlier, Andrew, just about the amount of content that's in each and every one of those Monocle magazines is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, how many words roughly would be in each one?
Well, in a big issue, it's probably about 40,000 words. So from the beginning, the idea was it was never a flick. It should be something that you felt you should keep and you could use as a resource and go back to again and again. But just picking up on what you said about the Independent, what's interesting is for Monocle, there is some of the DNA of a newspaper in Monocle. So that's why we like to do things pretty fast. We're reasonably nimble, and quite a few people who work at the magazine have come from a newspaper background.
Yeah, I mean, it must have been interesting working on that from the very beginning, starting a publication. And I know when I worked on magazines where it's just the concept is what does that look like? What does it look like? Because obviously I can't imagine you already knew from beginning. I know you worked closely, obviously, with Tyler and a whole editorial team and design team. But was there a lot of kind of playing around and trying to find different kind of looks and feel in the early days?
So Tyler had already had an idea. He'd run Wallpaper magazine. He'd left that behind. He wanted to start a more newsy based magazine, and he asked me to join from the paper. So there was a little bit of something set up at that
Okay.
time.
Okay.
But
Cool.
he we did that first issue, and I think the first issue was good. We kind of understood what we wanted from the first magazine. But as you know,
Yeah.
the strange thing is the first magazine is quite easy. What's more complicated is doing a second, a third, and a fourth, because you put all that energy into the launch issue, which takes, I don't know, a year to produce, and then suddenly you have to do another one in 4 weeks. So I think we knew what we wanted to be, but it did take probably like 4 or 5 issues before we were confident that we knew exactly our tone of voice and how to tell the stories in a way that felt very Monocle.
Yeah, when you get that kind of momentum going. I'm not
Yeah.
sure I appreciate you saying that the beginning is easy. I mean, us designers, when we're working on designing a new publication, I think that's the hardest bit. But I must admit, there's nothing better than taking kind of a concept and starting to see it kind of build over time,
I guess
systemizing it too.
I guess my point is when you look at new publications, is I rarely judge it on issue one. It's what's issue two like? Because you can do issue one almost like you're producing a book. You put so much
Yeah.
worry into it, you sweat over every detail. But then there has to become an energy and a pace with issue two and issue three where you just have to do it in 4 weeks. And I can
Yeah.
remember after that issue one, everyone was like, okay, now the cupboard is empty and we have to do another one of these in 4 weeks. How will that happen?
Did you ever get delayed with it? I mean, did you ever? Because that's another interesting thing about publications is if it's a fixed deadline, it's got to go to print a certain date and be on shelf and or subscription, all that. Was there any flexibility around that, or was it always fixed and immovable?
Well, there's no flexibility with the print date, and we've never not gone to press on the right day. But let's just say we're supposed to always finish the issue on the Friday before it goes to the repro house on the Monday. I think in all of those years, there's probably like twice that we haven't worked that final weekend in some way or another. So you're always like a bit later in the office that last week. It
Yeah,
bleeds into the weekend, so it's fine. It's good.
yeah. And I guess just talk a little bit about how it evolved, because obviously it was, I think it was just a magazine first, and it's kind of evolved into books, radio station, Monocle 24, film, etc. Did that just happen over time?
Some of it happened over time, but oddly, when you go back to the very first issue, we'd commissioned a line of bags that we were going to sell in the magazine, give to our journalists from a company called Yoshida in Japan. So in that very first issue, we were already selling product. And that became a way of having another revenue stream other than just advertising, which I can tell you at the moment is very important. And
Yeah, I can imagine.
and also very early on, we did a single podcast, which came out every Sunday. And that was the basis for thinking, could we do more in this world and have a radio station and a podcast service? So every year something got added on, and it diversified into a brand, but always with at its core, the magazine and the principles and the beliefs of that magazine feed everything.
I mean, a lot of the models in the magazine look like you and Tyler. Is that just a coincidence?
Well, rather old and in need of a care home. I'm not sure.
Whoa, no. You don't, no, not at all.
No, but the idea, again, fashion is interesting because, and look, even more important now, that in a world when there's been so much fast fashion and fashion is disposable and people are buying so many things supposedly, over the last few years, we've seen people not want that. So for our audience, we always knew we wanted to, maybe show a good jacket, but a jacket maybe you'd wear for 5 years. We've always tried to have that sense of sustainability in what we do, that the designs and products we pick are things that should have some longevity built into them. And we're not just doing fashion for 19-year-olds, and it's not about a photographer showing off with crazy styling. The clothes you see on the page should be things that you think you can wear. Look, you're in a t-shirt. You can go and run a company in a t-shirt. That's the truth for most of the people who read Monocle. there are many of them in the creative industries. They don't need to see too much flamboyance. They need to see good staples. And that again is what the magazine's about. Reliability, things made to last, durability, honesty.
I think, and it's timeless. And I think the key thing around that is it's around, I mean, you're the editor, you're creating the content. It's you and your team's vision of what's going on in the world. And that kind of, we'll come to some questions in a minute, but it's it's specifically the Monocle perspective on the world, right?
Yeah, so there's an attitude about everything we do, and we know what a Monocle story is. So, for example, we don't give too much coverage in the magazine to things we hate. So we do, we have a reviews page, but it's a page of recommendations, for example, in culture. We don't waste our time saying how terrible somebody is. And in business, we try to offer people benchmarks of quality, of innovation. Even in the current affairs pages, we're more interested in interviewing an amazing civic leader or looking at a country that is using diplomacy in a clever way. So the magazine normally, I hope, leaves people feeling positive about the world. And even now, in this extraordinary moment that we're going through, it feels like our job is not just to depress people. So I know for me, I'm a news junkie, but I've had to really limit what I read on other sites and in other newspapers, because with an endless ongoing story, you can get super kind of like distracted. So even now, we're saying to people, this is what you could be doing now. Here's some ideas for how you could navigate the weeks and months ahead.
Yeah, it's been obviously incredible time for all of us. I mean, lucky Australia, New Zealand has been relatively, in a safer situation to other countries like the UK and America, for example, and Europe. So we're lucky. We're still obviously isolated, but we've had a bit of a technical issue around Kat, who's our head of cross place, is sitting right next to me. She'll come on in a second. She's going to talk for a minute about her position in the business and Frost Place. And then we're going to get into the questions. So I'll just move to one side.
2 meters, I hope.
Yeah, 2 meters away.
Apologies that I seem to have got lost in hyperspace. But look, I think couldn't be more excited than talking to Andrew tonight about what's happening. And it's really great for us to get a global view on what people are saying around the world about what's happening in place. I mean, we created Cross Place at the end of last year because we could see that there was this really big new movement of people talking about cities, talking about the future of cities. But certainly in my lifetime, and I think in many people, we've never seen an event like this really start people asking questions about what should our cities, what should places be like. And it's interesting for us as specialists in marketing and creating place visions, like already our customers, our clients are all turning to us, turning to each other for advice, for trying to read their way through what it has been, an event that we've never experienced before. So Andrew, so excited to hear what you have to share. And I guess, our team is really kind of really alert and looking to make a difference at this really critical time for people when we're looking at the future of what should places be like, and what's going to make people, I think, happy in this new world. Because I think that's one of the things that we've found is that people are starting to live their life differently and question a lot of the things that were the foundation of how we lived in the past.
Oh, can't hear your voice. Oh, that was previously. So let's kick off the questions. Andrew, you ready?
I'm ready.
You are ready. So what you did a home issue, which unfortunately we were going to show, but we can't show tonight for technical issues. But and it's not yet in Australia, unfortunately. But I do have this issue, which I thought was wonderful. I thought it was wonderful in terms of live a gentler life and be kinder, restart, repurpose, refresh, read more, relax. I mean, that came out it came out in February, way before all of this. And kind of in a way, you guys were ahead of the game with that, right?
Well, that issue is extraordinary because lots of people have come to us and said how prescient it was. there's a really bizarre story at the beginning, which is our correspondent in New York goes canoeing on a thing called the Gowanus Canal in New York, which is a filthy canal. And at the end, the guy who's interviewing says, what would be great is if we just kind of bump elbows rather than shake hands. We need a new attitude about hygiene. And that whole gentle theme has been super important for us, about how we get people to express themselves and express themselves in a way that is a little bit kinder and more inclusive. And from very early on, people often ask why we're not on Twitter, for example. And one of the things is that we've always been worried about the shouting that happens around issues on Twitter, where people feel they're anonymous. So the issue was partly also about how we behave in a digital space, which we're learning today as well, but how we behave in a digital space. But then the issue that we just did about home hit. We were producing a magazine just as the world was going into lockdown. And we quickly switched, again, that news idea, we quickly switched the whole thing into being about why you need to be at home, how to make your home a place where you feel safe and secure, that can sustain you, and also what we want from our homes in the future. So it was a wonderful issue to put together, and we did some tough things as well. We spoke to the newspaper editors, stories of their cities in lockdown, often with very high death rates. So it was an important little issue. But the most amazing thing for all these people, I'm sorry it hasn't got to Australia, but all the people in lockdown in Europe who suddenly found this coming through their letterbox, and their reaction to us has been amazing. So keeping the print going has been tough, but really important.
So coming off the home issue, how do you predict the way we live in the cities will change, and will we see a revival of suburbia and cocooning as a result?
I think we're definitely going to see a temporary shift, and I don't know how long this pandemic will have an effect on us, or how long the actual virus will be present in our cities and towns. But I was just reading a thing here yesterday. Yesterday was the first day after 2 months that estate agents can begin to show properties again. There's a lot of pent-up demand, they say, for people wanting to move. But people in the city are looking for homes in the countryside. They're looking for homes outside the city centre. Now, for me, I personally hope that isn't a huge trend that stays in place. I've loved the revival of inner city cores, the regeneration of even many American cities. You look at downtown districts that have bounced back, downtown Los Angeles, for example. And that's a great story, because it's about community. It's about, we have to face the fact that we have so many people who need to find homes. We have to find a way to keep that story going. But yes, in the short term, it's a little bit scary. Will people want to flee the city? Will people not want to be in communal spaces? And will people, for example, not want to go in co-working spaces for some time? And I think that will take a huge hit. So it's going to be a difficult time, but the positives are, out on the street, we will walk more, we will exercise more. So there are some good things that will come about it. But just finally, I think we shouldn't think that everything we're worrying about now we'll be worrying about in 2 years or 3 years. Some of this will pass, and some of it will stick.
Yeah, cool. Kat's got a question for you. Here we go.
Andrew, I'm really interested. I often listen to the Urbanist podcast. I love it. It's such a great source of information. And I guess one of the great things that comes out of that is that you get to speak to all these incredible architects and planners. And I'm really interested in what you're hearing from them, particularly about the density of cities moving forward, because I think that this is a conversation I'm hearing is, even in the workplace, we've moved to very dense conglomerations of people. And now it's kind of like, are we going to see that spread out? Like, is density going to be something that changes due to the pandemic?
There's a few things. I've spoken to quite a few developers in Europe and urbanists and city planners over the last few weeks. One thing is a feeling that maybe lots of things got planning permission, which are not very sustaining if you have to spend more than a few hours in them. So this, what's called the hotelization of accommodation. So you have a room which it's fine if you want to eat something, sleep, and then live your life with your friends outdoors. But many people have found that in the lockdown, there is no balcony. There is no access to fresh air. They're often in buildings where you can't even open the windows. Now, suddenly that has become really problematic. And I think that planners will be more concerned about nodding those things through. I spoke to a developer yesterday in San Francisco doing a huge project. And they're concerned because even the tech companies are saying, we won't ask people to come back to work in the way that we did even 6 months ago. That will never happen again. So they're worried that some of the big anchor tenants are going to be absent from developments in the next few months. So things that haven't already raised their money may be delayed. But other projects which have a completion date in like 5-10 years are ploughing ahead. They can't change their model too much. But yeah, I think there's going to be a little bit more demand for personal space. And again, coming back to the office, hot desking was often sold as a thing that was creative. It allowed you to sit with whoever you wanted. But often for many companies, it was just a way of cutting space in the office and reducing their rent. And now I think people are going to say, I want a space that's mine. I want to know it's clean. I want to be responsible for where I sit. So I think, again, things like those trends will go down again for a little while.
Absolutely.
This is high-tech shift. Do you think cities will shift from their focus away from being global to being more local as a result of all this?
Well, I think the best cities always have been that mix of things. I'm speaking to you, I live really right in the heart of the city. And I've been amazed at how our community has come together. I live on a street with like 40 houses. We really do know every single person, not just to say hello to now, but to have a conversation with. Everyone has come together in a very incredible way, not dependent on technology, not dependent, I think, on face-to-face communications. We have a few senior people who live down the road. We've all got involved in taking care of them and their needs. So I think this local thing is really important. And for me, when we don't have restaurants open here, we don't have shops open here, but when I can go out and spend some money, it will be in the local stores that I want them to bounce back. I want them to thrive. But even for our audience, for Monocle's readers, when they've traveled to other cities, the things that they've wanted to see are, yeah, sure, they'll go up the Eiffel Tower once in their life if they go to Paris, but what they want to find is like the good neighborhood, the place where they can go and feel a little bit local. So I think even for a global world, making powerful communities is important. And there's this notion of the 15-minute rule, which I think will become more important, which is wherever you live, all key services should be within 15 minutes. So you should be able to do your grocery shopping, you should be able to do some exercise, you should be able to get on public transport, all within like 15 minutes of your home. And I think that that's the kind of planning you'll see coming to the front now.
Cool.
Andrew, it's very funny. Someone said in the chat, I don't know if you've seen it, this is Mother Nature's sort of reaction to hot desking. I think it's a great, observation. But I think one of the things I am really interested in, and you mentioned it before, is the sharing economy. We've had this sort of huge emergence of like co-working, co-living, all those sorts of things. And I just wonder, you mentioned it, are we all going to start going, well, maybe I'm not so comfortable anymore with that? What are you seeing in that area?
I think that's going to be super complicated because in some of the residential projects that were coming to the fore here, for example, in London, the idea was that you literally had your bedroom and then you were out in a communal area cooking with other people, sharing the living space. Those places have not been sustainable during this. You can't be with 20 other people in the evening. You don't want to be with 20 other people in the evening. So I think there's going to be a break on that kind of project. Co-working, what's interesting is in every city, you see hotels, cafes, full of people working on their laptops, headphones on. Now, if, as you were saying earlier before we started it, if in Australia a cafe can have 10 people in there, they don't want 10 people who are not buying coffee and not buying food. They want people in there who are spending their dollar, spending their pound, spending their euro. So that attitude to we will host people just because it looks cool to have the place full, that's going to go away, because cafes will need to make money and they'll want people in there who are coming friends to eat. So I think what's going to happen is the people who are nomadic workers, finding a place to perch in a hotel lobby or a cafe, are going to end up working from home. So I think there's going to be a lot more home working, and people won't want to be in these huge open plan co-working spaces either. That will, some of that will come back, but I think there is a real shift for those people, those nomadic workers, to thinking, actually, my bedroom is just as good as actually sitting in a cafe, and I feel safer.
I'm not sure if you just answered that my next question, but in your opinion, what will return to work look like, and will it be business as usual?
I think it depends how long this goes on. You see some worrying headlines from the World Health Organization this morning, our time, saying 3 years, maybe 4 years that this hangs around. Then that begins to become like permanent change in the way that we behave. Then you begin to really worry about what the nature of the return to work is. But I think the idea that you have more space around you at work will become important. Now, in some countries, like in Germany, they've always had a kind of a very strict rule about the amount of space around every desk, and I think that will put them in a good place. But companies that were really kind of packing people in are going to be a lot more cautious. But in the end, it's like, I'm running a magazine, and we've done 3 issues now with me working from home, sending it from our computer, in our own homes. But there is something about creativity that still involves people coming together in real time, and we've done amazing, and the team have been incredible. But there's still some conversations which would have been better, richer, quicker, if you'd just been able to turn around and say, I know, I've got an idea, and then suddenly it happens. And also inspiration, for my team, it's like people come in, I went to this thing last night, I met this person, I saw this show, and I realized that we're missing that energy of the crowd, the energy of being amongst amazing people.
Missing people.
Andrew, just on that fact, I think it's really interesting. I know we were talking about the influence of TV on people psychologically, and I think one of the things that we've been talking about is, are we going to see a generation corona, like a complete change in social norms and behaviour because of how people have been impacted by the pandemic? Like, do you want to talk a bit about that and what you're seeing in that area?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit split here, because when you look at many other crises that have happened, there is a period afterwards where people are very unsure. So they're unsure maybe because they have lost work and they have less money, and they pull back a little bit. They're more cautious. So immediately after the crash of 1928, when behavioral psychologists look at that period, they see a generation of people who were changed by it forever. So for the rest of their lives, they were always careful about money. The same for a generation that came out of this, the Second World War. This isn't a war. I'm just comparing it to a big real-time event. Even something like 9/11 in New York. When you went to New York in the year after, people were just cautious about how they did things, and it took a long time to get over it. And I think there will be that. But then the strange thing is that then you often have people who are hedonistic. They want excitement. So you have an explosion of fun in the Roaring '20s, in the '30s after the crash. I think there will be a bounce back, and there will be some hedonism. But I think there will be a generation that will be marked by this time. Their attitudes to what they can depend on will have changed, and it builds on something that was already happening here because we had a financial crash. Job security has become less and less over time. More people working freelance. So this, what you hold on to as benchmarks of success in that kind of world is different. Tiny things. We know that there's a generation who, 20 years ago, you'd have thought, I need to get a car. Where's my TV? These were signs of progress. All of those things have really fallen away. So for this generation, when there's even a bit more insecurity, will they be a bit freer with how they think about things? Will they be, if travel comes back and it's easy to travel, will they feel less tethered to place? So I'm a bit torn. I think there's going to be a moment where people are very unsure, but when they come out of it, it could be amazing. It could be either an explosion of fun, but I think certainly then a sense of freedom of being unshackled from what their parents probably thought of as success. I think that's going to change even faster.
It's very interesting, isn't it, Andrew? And I think one of the things that I'm really interested in understanding is what might be the design gains from this pandemic. And people are coming in via the chat saying, well, how do we think things like how we treat public space or planning will change? Like, what do you think are going to be the good things that come out in terms of design?
Well, I'm positive about public space and public realm, whether that's parks or the reuse of existing spaces for more public use. That was happening already, but that is being fast tracked. In Italy, in Milan, a city that really badly hit. They've just put over 35 kilometers of roadway in the center of the street just for cycling and walking. And the public realm is taking over all other bits of space. And I think that's really important. And I don't know if it's happened in your city, but here in London, there's an amazing thing which I've noticed, which is because there are no cars around, it's super, super quiet. People who live in buildings that don't have outdoor space have colonized the bits in front of their building. So you walk past and there are people taking the sun or they're working on their laptop. On Saturday, I walked around here and a guy had put out a paddling pool for his kid in the street. And then his dog was asleep in the street and he was like playing with his kids. Now, nobody would ever do that. So I think also the public, when the traffic goes back, you see that people take more of the space. Our little road, people have been, because they're stuck at home, they've been putting plants in the street and all sorts of things. So I think what is judged as public realm will change as well. And that's a really amazing thing, that people will feel a bit of ownership of the bit outside the door. But I think that many of the things that we're seeing as pop-ups now will stick. Berlin, Paris, London, all saying more pop-up spaces for walking and cycling, and I think they will remain.
It's interesting. You talk about the cars. What I've noticed a lot is the planes. I mean, the lack of planes now has meant that you hear birds. Maybe there's more birds than before, but it's quite beautiful. It's just calm, and you just feel like you're amongst nature. You don't need to go into the countryside now because it's actually come back. Interesting. There was a question that actually, Monocle is obviously a big part of Monocle is actually flying, isn't it? It's like you always have wonderful suitcases and travel gear in your publication normally. Being a global traveler has been a big part of Monocle's, I guess, ethos, I think. How do you feel being grounded?
Well, mostly it's okay. I've got I have some outdoor space. I have a home that I like, and I have a neighborhood that I like, and I've been able to do my job, and all those things are important. But it's not just the magazine. I think it's pretty much human desire, is it, to want to know what's over the horizon, to want to see new things, to want to see other communities, and that doesn't go away. I would hate it to think that I could never travel again. I need to see people who I love around the world, and also for many of our readers, that they are people who maybe they're, I don't know, they're French but they work in London, they're German but they work in New York. So for them, travel isn't just a luxury. Travel is their livelihood. Travel is about seeing friends and family, And just look at the huge communities here. We have huge communities from Africa, from South Asia. Many of those people go back and forth to see those families. That isn't luxury. That is keeping families together. So I hope it comes back in a way that people feel secure and safe around. Will travel cost a bit more? Probably. Does that matter? No, it's probably a pretty good thing. And that on that huge, the weight of mass tourism, then perhaps there is a chance here to do a bit of a check and think, actually, we can change the relationship a bit. So is this a good time when Airbnb has kind of disappeared from London, to say, actually, it's quite nice not having quite so many Airbnb people dragging their suitcases down your road. A city like Venice that for years has struggled to cut the numbers of people coming to St. Mark's Square. They've got a full brake on. As they open up again, they can control it. So I recognize the need to, but for many people, it's not a luxury. For many people, it's their family, it's their life.
Yeah, it's a bit of a reboot for everybody. This is a question that you actually put forward: is why graphics do matter more than ever? I mean, I thought I would ask that question. What's your opinion on that? And a highly graphic, highly graphic world and highly graphic publication.
I don't know. I've just been looking at some of the amazing work that has been done to get very simple messages across at this time. You look at the posters that have been put up on the New York subway, which have encouraged people who should not be on the subway at this time to go home, but using the Helvetica fonts of the New York subway to deliver really clear, beautiful messages. I think as you go forward, you need incredible wayfinding systems in our cities that encourage people to walk. As we said, walking is going to become ever more important. We don't want packed public transport. Now, often people end up getting on a bus because they don't know the way, or they don't realize the place they're going to is actually only a 15-minute walk. So beautifully done wayfinding systems are nice nudges to make people change their mobility patterns. So I think that will be important. And I think also, even now that the medical situation in many countries, it's so complicated and it's so difficult to understand. The role of graphics there, if you look at like someone like Francesco Franchi with La Repubblica, the work he's done there, in really simple ways, telling people what's going on in their hospitals and their communities. And that, again, changed people's behavior. So graphics is a really powerful tool that we should be using in lots of different ways.
I love that.
And also in a sunny way. I'll tell you in another sunny way. Is that in the bounce back, when the bounce backs happen, every city is going to have to rebrand itself a little bit to come out confident about what it stands for, both for its citizens, the business community, and for people who come back. And I think that already we're seeing many cities talking about going back to their values and trying to tell their story afresh. So I think even there, for the confidence of cities as they bounce back, graphics has a huge role to play.
I was just this question that popped into my head just now, just around like for a while, we're not going to be able to leave this country, leave this island, this massive island. And there's going to be a lot of, once we can kind of move around a bit more, there's going to be a lot of local travel. I mean, what do you think in terms around national destinations? Certainly for here, a lot of them had big fires and already suffering from lack of tourism, such as a place like Kangaroo Valley, for example.
Well, I think in every country, this is going to be the summer. If there are holidays to be had, it's going to be the summer of local tourism, and that's not a problem for most countries. The UK can have some shocking weather in the summer, which is the only kind of down on that. But already here, there had been a bit of a regeneration of hospitality that was happening here, which could gain from that. The rethinking of rural hotels, of seaside resorts, has been happening. So it could be a good summer for enjoying your home nation. But here in the UK at the moment, we're not supposed to travel more than 20 kilometers from our house to go and see anything. So even that would be an exciting thing to be able to go a couple of 100 kilometers to see something. But again, that isn't a bad reality check. That if hotels think, okay, the first thing I need to do is look after my domestic community, and I need to have the doors open for people who are in my neighborhood, that isn't a bad thing. So that we'll begin to see some benefits from that as well.
Well, that was our first question from the audience about hotels. I guess one key question was around, do you think people are nicer as a result of this? I mean, I know that people are still suffering heavily around the world, and there's been a huge amount of death. So it's not like we're in a great situation at the moment. But I mean, like you said before about people kind of being out in the streets and becoming kind of more friendly or kind of more communities generating. Do you think that's, I mean, obviously, do you think we'll become nicer as a result of all this?
I think what's interesting is, I think it turns out that most people are actually pretty nice people, because actually when an older person in your road needs their food shopping done, actually quite a few people volunteer to help. People want to do good. I think we've been surprised at ourselves, actually. We're nicer than we thought. We're more willing to kind of help in situations. But I think that's also because people have had this thing, they've had a bit more time. And actually, when you give people more time, and you're not kind of, in the morning, if it was a normal Monocle morning, I'd get out the door, I'd be late, I'd be on my bike, I'd be rushing to work, and there'd be boom, boom, boom throughout the day. I'm still busy the whole day, but actually there's a bit more time to think about people and things. And I think that is the kind of the luxury of now, is to think, okay, what bits from this do we want to make sure that become entrenched and become permanent? And I know for us, that in our road and in our wider community, that's the thing that I've just found amazing. Even you can get a takeaway coffee here. So there's a coffee store I go to around the corner every morning. I have a proper conversation with the two Italian guys in there every single morning. I never went there before because I was on my bicycle, but we've got to know each other. There's has a family in Italy, and I think everybody's finding their version of that. A little bit more time.
I've definitely seen that in my neighborhood. Families that were all grumpy, we're all now playing and going for bike rides together. What we're going to do, we now got a whole bunch of questions. We got the next 15 minutes, some questions from the floor or questions from the chat. So Kat's going to head off with the first one.
So I think this is very relevant to what you were just talking about, Andrew. And someone wants to know, this rise we're seeing of people making and growing things locally. Like I think my brother's become a local baker. He used to work for Apple, now he's a baker. Like we've seen this huge change, and as you say, how we're spending our time. So do you think that's going to become more popular? Is that going to be something we're going to continue to make time for, do you think? Because I think it does come back to this extra time we're seeing. But people want to know what's going to happen to everyone who's turned into a baker at this time.
Again, let's think about the positive about that. We all know that we have there's often a big disconnection between the food we eat and how it's produced, and it kind of just miraculously arrives in our stores. And now suddenly people are making food, and it gives them some understanding of, actually food is a fragile thing, especially when, a few weeks ago you'd go to the supermarket here, you couldn't buy any flour to make any bread because it had all gone. So it was the first time in many people's lives that had to think, okay, what is food security? Where does my food come from? What should we keep as basics in the house? Should I actually know how to make a loaf of bread? So again, I hope that some of that kind of sticks. But the truth is, I cook. We cook here at home every day, twice a day. But I still want restaurants to come back. I still know that there are people out there who can cook a lot better than me, and I want some of that to come back. But I think making, fixing, repairing, we've all had to do some of that, and that's again, there's nothing bad with that. That's all kind of wonderful, and I think that people have realized that many of the things they would have outsourced very quickly, they do have the ability to do themselves. I've been doing quite a lot of home decorating, and I can tell you that's not something I intend to do going forwards. Well, I'm not very good at it, but everyone's having a go. That's the good thing.
That's cool. I guess one question here is: are you sick of discussing COVID yet? I mean, I think we all are, although it's still very much going on.
Well, as you say, it's quite hard to think of something that's not impacting in some way. It's everything you think about. It's like, what you watch on TV is defined because you can't go to the cinema. What you eat is because you're eating at home, as we just said. So it is defining everything. But I think we've gone through some waves of those early kind of panic about it. But I think it's very difficult now for companies who are trying to do public relations or marketing. I see in my inbox in the morning, it's like, X company, our COVID-19 response. I literally I don't ever open those emails. It's like, I've had thousands of them. And I think that companies now and businesses now have to get used to the period they're in and start telling their stories afresh and be a little bit confident about going out in the world.
Mm.
Even if it's only via a Zoom meeting.
Yeah. I'm intrigued by what you make twice a day, by the way.
It's pretty basic when I say make. That's a lot of salad going down in this house, I can tell you. To cope with the lack of exercise.
I don't know how the English can cope without Marks and Spencer's being open. Surely, is it open in some way?
Oh yeah, so don't worry. Marks and Spencer's
food hall. Plugging it.
No, the food hall is open. The shops are closed. But again, yeah, I think it's oddly the small shops that have done well. So the bakers that are still open, and those places have become fundamental to people. People are happy to go and buy something here and something there because they've got a bit more time.
Another question just came through is, are there any lessons we can learn from the last financial crash to help us through this?
Well, it's really interesting for Monocle because we launched in 2007, and then 2008 hit, and the world was going to hell in a handcart, and we were cautious what would happen that year. The real difference between then and now is that this is properly global, whereas in 2008, you could pivot to do business elsewhere. There were emerging economies that weren't really affected. Brazil was booming. We had talk of the BRIC nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, all doing super well, while Europe was suffering. Asia pulled out of it quicker. But now, wherever you go, everybody is affected by the same things. For us, when we got through that difficulty, and I think our attitude is the same now, is be lean and mean and fast and pivot and focus on the things that can bring in revenue and can keep your teams together and can sustain you. But what's important is you don't lose sense of the core values of what your business is about. So it's very easy for companies now to kind of think, everything's lost. We have to restart. We have to be a completely different business. Stay true to your principles, and that's what people will come to you for. And I know that for us at Monocle, it's been an extraordinary period. Again, maybe because people have time. The emails, the feedback you get, 99.9% positive, and just people writing long letters saying what they think of the brand and why they're engaged with you. And I think that comes from having a good sense of community around you as well. So I think it's important to make sure you've got a community, you look after it, and even if you have to change the way that you do daily business, you stay true to your core values.
That's cool. Good answer.
I've got a question here, which I think is really interesting. They've asked, what are some of the worst recommendations you've heard so far for the reopening of the economy?
Well, I don't.
You're talking about staying true to who you are, but what are things that people are recommending?
Well, I don't know that some of the extremes. I think you have to be careful of some of the doomsayers out there who are that nobody will ever go back to the office. That we've lost the ability to, we've lost the desire rather to work in the way that we used to. I just don't think we should make those snap decisions in the middle of a crisis. We should be aware of what's going on. But when you come out of it, what will be like, we have who is Australian, by the way, our fashion editor is very funny. He said to me, if this is over by October or over by September, he said, everybody I know will want to go to Ibiza. But of course, I don't think it is going to be. I don't think it is going to. So on the one hand, he's telling me about, kind of like how fashion is changing and being kind of kinder and nicer. And on the other hand, he's like, actually, when it's over, I think people just go crazy. So again, it's that thing. I think let's not judge too much about restarting the economy. And look, digital is amazing, and every company should have a version of it. But even now, I'm wary of some of the limits of it. I don't think it's a solution for everything. And so people who are saying, there will no longer be a need to meet in person, and there will no longer be conferences, and trade fairs will no longer happen. Those things aren't just about having a glass of wine with a client or a jolly. They're fundamental to business. There's so much industry that happens within, for example, a trade fair, that I worry about people who think that you can do everything just like we're doing today.
And Andrew, one other really interesting question I saw in the chat is disadvantaged people, like people who have less advantage, like how are they coping with this crisis, and how can we, those of us who are more advantaged, like act to, for better social inclusion, for looking after those people?
Well, it's interesting because we've been looking at over the last couple of days at the UK government documents here about the return to work and what you need to do, and it's going to be quite exclusionary. It's going to be quite difficult because one of the things they say is don't encourage people to come back to work who are vulnerable, for example. So people who have maybe disabilities or health issues, don't encourage those people to return to work. Those people should definitely be encouraged to continue working from home for a long time. Seniors, the same. But in a way, that just encourages their exclusion from society even more. So I think there's going to be a lot of work that has to be done where people who are already vulnerable for health issues don't get left behind as the world edges back out and feels some confidence that they know how to navigate this. I think also the disadvantage about public transport. So many countries, people are told, do not go on public transport. Either you walk, cycle, or drive. Now, suddenly, again, we talked about this earlier, many people don't have a car anymore, but access to a car suddenly becomes, an important thing. So what's the risk is that people who are slightly wealthier can decide when they do and don't go to the office will be fine. But other people who are in jobs where they have to go on public transport and there's a fixed time for starting their jobs are going to be disadvantaged. And what can you do about that? What you have to do is start genuine conversations with these people. What do you need from us? How can we help you? Rather than you prescribing, this is we are not going to invite you back into the workplace because you're vulnerable. How do you feel about what would they like to happen? And that's the only way forwards, I think.
There's so many great questions coming through, and it's a shame we can't ask them all.
I've got one more while you're looking.
Yeah, go on, Kat, go on.
So a very interesting question as well, of someone saying, look, the business model for places and for cities has always been about dollar per square metre and, realising the financial value of land, and they're wondering, well, what's the new model for valuing places going to be? Like, we're all seeing, much more value put on green space, on sustainability, and I guess what they're wondering is, are we going to move past this economic rationalist view of cities, of how we value things, into different ways of how we value places?
Well, I'm sure it depends who you speak to. If you're a landlord, then you're still going to be which is an important.
Yeah,
important
fair
thing.
enough.
This city I'm in is divided up between huge estates that own most of the leases here on properties, on businesses, on shops. Huge part owned by the Crown Estate, for example. Now, they're not going to want to see their rents come down, even though they're going to, because there are going to be so many vacancies of stores and restaurants that haven't made it through the last 3 months. But other tenants, for the people wanting to go into buildings, they're going to be thinking about well-being. They're going to be thinking about well-being in a rich sense, which is about cleanliness, the security of their staff, spaces where bikes can be stored and all those things, and giving over more space to people within those buildings. And I think that you're already seeing that for many big companies, the Googles and the Amazons of this world, that when they choose city office space, they're demanding already that there are additional things for their staff, which aren't about a desk and a little bit of room around you. That has in the past been about communal space. That would be a little bit more challenged. But I think that it's going to be really intriguing for people who are trying to get projects up and running now. They're going to have to think really hard who the tenant is going to be and what those people want from them. And I think for residential, I think the push for outdoor space is going to become ever greater. Now, again, most cities are really useless at using their rooftop spaces. There is a whole layer of cities in most places that is unused. Unlike in Tokyo, anyone's been in Tokyo and looked down on the city, you see people playing baseball on the tops of buildings.
Mm-hmm.
There are running tracks. There are creches, and we don't use that top tier of our cities in any way that we should. And I think that will also become a much stronger force over the coming months and years.
We are, unless there's anything else you want to add, obviously want to just apologize to everybody for the few glitches we've had, technical issues. We're going to provide a replay link for everybody too, who's attended, just so you can share it or watch it again. We're going to send all the remaining questions to you, Andrew, direct. So there's a few hundred of them there.
Okay.
I'd really love to. We'll find some way of sharing them because I think they're really great topic. It's been so cool to catch up with you, Andrew. Me and Kat sharing an earpiece each. I think
tell everyone, Vince.
I think my microphone's in one of them, isn't it?
I think we've learned our isolation version.
But it's been you've been so generous with your time. It's been so cool to hear your perspective on things now and going forward. I just want to thank you, Andrew.
Well, thanks to you, Vince and Kat, and to everybody who took some time this evening to try and watch us and follow despite any glitches. So thank you very much.
Absolutely, and I just want to thank Luca and Mac as well for making it all happen. We've got another defrost coming up. I think it's on the 28th of this month, and we've got Fabian Barron, who we're interviewing, having a chat with. Hopefully, that's coming up very in like 2 weeks' time. So we'll send out an email regarding that. But yeah, it's been so cool. Really privileged to catch up with you, Andrew. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, have a good day, everybody.
Thank you, Andrew.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.